Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. We're going to be looking at the 3-part Dracula miniseries that was released on Netflix and BBC. It received good reviews from fans and critics. Personally, it's one of my favorite renditions of Dracula. The Count himself is played by Claes Bang, who absolutely knocks it out of the park, being able to come off suave or extremely menacing. He is the first Danish actor to win the European Film Award for Best Actor for his role in the 2017 movie The Square. Sister Agatha Van Helsing and her descendant is played by Dolly Wells. Jonathan Harker is played by John Heffernan, and I really liked Lucy Westenra, played by Lydia West. Before we fully dive into Dracula, today's video is sponsored by Manta Sleep. I often stay up so late researching vampire movies, I've kinda become one. And I don't know about you, but when I sleep I need complete darkness, and that's where Manta Sleep can help. Their mask blocks out 100% of light, which helps you get a proper sleep because even a bit of light in your room can interrupt your sleep cycle. Their design puts no pressure on your eyelids, and you can move the eye cups wherever you like to get the perfect fit. They use high quality, breathable, and durable materials. Manta has other options available like silk, which is better for your skin and hair. They also offer heating and cooling eye pads for your sleep mask, which can help with puffy eyes from allergies, dark circles, and more. Their best-selling mask is the Manta Sleep Mask Pro. It has many extra features like special C-shaped eye cups that provide 100% blackout but are designed for side sleepers like me. It also has a special design strap to go over your ears and not on them, which is supposed to be more comfortable. If you want to sleep like the undead, check out Manta Sleep at mantasleep.com and use my code Kogan for a discount. Don't wait to start improving your sleep, and thanks to Manta for sponsoring the video. The miniseries is only 3 episodes, but they are quite long. The first episode starts off in 1897 at St. Mary's Convent, and we are hearing Jonathan Harker retelling the horrific events that took place at Dracula's castle while he was held there. He is telling these events to Agatha Van Helsing, a nun who has a fascination with dark creatures and the occult. The second episode takes place on a Russian ship traveling to Whitby, England, and Dracula is on board. This episode kind of feels like a murder mystery because people are trying to figure out what's in this mysterious room on the ship. The final episode takes place in the modern day, involving Agatha's descendant Zoe Van Helsing. She's a scientist at the Jonathan Harker Foundation, a place that studies vampires. We're going to look at Dracula, the undead, his maze-like castle, and all his unique abilities. Jonathan Harker is a lawyer sent from England to help the Count acquire some land back in England. However, the Count forces Jonathan to stay for a month so that Jonathan can teach him better English and the customs of England before he travels there. During that time, the Count begins to feed on Jonathan. At first, he appeared to be a feeble old man, but eventually he's as young as Jonathan. Not only did Dracula become younger, but he's also learned how to speak better English, almost perfect according to Jonathan. When Dracula feeds on people, he not only takes their blood, but he also takes part of their skills and personality. He says, "Blood is lives," a saying that Agatha found very strange. She asked Jonathan if he really said lives instead of life, like she knew there was something more to that sentence. Dracula wants to travel to the New World, England. He wants more intelligent people to feed on, because as he says, you are what you eat. Jonathan tried to escape the castle every day when Dracula was sleeping, but as Dracula told him, the castle is a prison without locks. It was designed by a man named Petruvio after his wife died. He made the castle like an impossible maze meant to drive you insane, with endless hallways and corridors. While searching the castle, Jonathan comes upon some wooden boxes nailed shut. He opens one up and there's a bunch of flies. They seem to be filled up with junk, but then he realizes they're filled with bodies. These people aren't dead though. These are the undead, victims of Dracula. Most of the time when a vampire feeds on someone and they die, they become undead. While the shambling creatures are chasing and grabbing at Jonathan, they keep saying, "Amor ama." He later finds out from Sister Agatha that this means "kill me" in Romanian. They were begging to be put out of their misery. Agatha says they have lost their divine ability to die. Life is now an incurable disease for the undead. Their bodies rot, but their consciousness persists. Even as dust, their pain goes on. It's a secret that all grave diggers keep, that some of us are meant to scratch at our coffin lids for all eternity. And we see this exact scenario when a scientist in the second episode retells when he unearthed a body for research and found the coffin lid had scratches on it. The creature attacked him and killed 2 others, scarring the scientist for life and giving him horrific nightmares of the incident. Dracula travels to a random graveyard and tells Lucy to put her hand on the ground, and they can hear the undead knocking on their coffin lids and speaking in their graves. Lucy asks if they're vampires, but Dracula says, "Nothing so evolved. They're just undead. The unfortunate few that remain sentient as they rot." So this means that people must be able to catch the virus or a curse that makes people undead without being bitten by a vampire. Dracula refers to these undead as children of the night. An undead child is seen watching them from a distance in the graveyard. Dracula says some of the smaller ones wiggle their way to the surface. Agatha mentions that there are other cases of the undead around the world. It also seems like not everyone that is bitten by a vampire becomes one. Dracula had a vampire bride, wanted Johnny to be a bride, and Lucy as well. He never outright stated Johnny was a vampire, but he had fangs and said he was craving blood, so there's a good chance that he was. Dracula did, however, confirm that Lucy was a vampire. Dracula said Lucy was the finest bride he had created in 500 years. And when Lucy survives being cremated, Dracula says to Agatha, "You have underestimated the resilience of the vampire." It's possible only some humans can become vampires, or Dracula has to do something extra to make them become a vampire instead of just undead. Because we can see from all those people that were in the wooden boxes what happens to people that he usually feeds on. It's revealed that the virus that creates the undead predates Dracula, which means that there was vampires and undead before him. He probably caught the virus just like others, but for some reason his body reacted differently. Agatha suspects this is because who Dracula decides to feed on. I'll talk more about this later though. People can catch this affliction like a virus, but it's implied that it is supernatural in origin, since it grants extraordinary abilities. No person in the show is ever turned into a vampire exactly like himself, other than the one in the castle, but we don't see how he turned her. He might have showed her some secret way to keep her humanity. Agatha says most vampires end up becoming completely feral beasts, so Dracula must have found some way to avoid this. When Jonathan is turned, he says that he's starting to crave blood, and his teeth become sharper like fangs. So possibly Jonathan would have eventually become more like Dracula or his bride if he were to feed on blood. When Dracula feeds from someone and they die, shortly after they will twitch around and then come back to life. According to Dracula, Jonathan did this remarkably fast, so it can possibly take anywhere from hours to days for someone to come back. Dracula also praises Jonathan for still having his own will after coming back, because he says most that come back have nothing more than hunger, yet Jonathan still tries to escape. It's also worth noting that even though Jonathan is undead or possibly a vampire, sunlight and the cross he's wearing does not affect him, so these weaknesses are more specific to Dracula himself and not all undead. The virus of vampirism is spread through a simple bite, not the giving of blood. However, the undead virus seems a little different because totally random people seem to be able to catch it, and it's not exactly clear how. It does seem like only some people are capable of becoming full vampires, while some others will only become undead. So there's a good chance that it's the exact same virus and it just reacts differently to different people. The woman in the castle was a vampire for sure, and she is one of the only other undead we see that doesn't look like a rotting corpse. Agatha says it's a possibility that since Dracula is very particular on who he feeds on, that this could be how he has retained his human looks and mind. And if his wife was feeding on the same thing that he was, she would also remain much more human than most undead. Dracula himself has some special weaknesses, but as for the undead and all the other vampires, there's only one thing that can kill them: a stake through the heart. You can also not commit suicide. Johnny tries to stake himself, but Dracula says, "Don't you think the undead have tried that, Johnny? A stake works, but it has to be put there by someone else." Agatha said before that the consciousness of the undead can carry on even after they turn to dust, so I guess in that case they could never be staked. Let's take a look at Dracula himself and how he became immortal. Dracula is 523 years old at the end of the first series. He is similar to the undead in that he does not age and cannot die, but is a little more complicated because he can regenerate and has many unique abilities. Feeding on blood keeps him strong and his body from decaying. When he hasn't had fresh blood for an extended period of time, he will start to age. It's unclear if he would ever actually die from lack of blood though. Agatha says blood to him is more of an addiction than sustenance. Other undead might be able to feed on blood as well, but we don't see that in the first season. When Dracula feeds on blood, it's much more than just satisfying his hunger. When drinking blood, Dracula can learn new languages, memories, and possibly any skills or talents the person possessed. He says, "Every person I've drank from lives on in my veins." When Jonathan Harker cut his finger, Dracula then somehow knew the name of Jonathan's wife, even though he never mentioned it. So even the smell of blood has some information in it. Dracula enjoyed feeding on Lucy because she had no fear of death. Dracula said she almost loved it, where he on the other hand was terrified of it. So by feeding on her blood, this allowed him a reprieve from his fear of death. But he also provided her with something in return. When Dracula feeds on someone, he can put them into a kind of hypnosis or dream state that he can control. While Jonathan was staying in the castle, he had vivid dreams every night of his wife, and this turned out to be Dracula feeding on him and creating these fantasies. It's also important to note that not only does Dracula gain someone's memories among other things when feeding on someone, but that person he's feeding on also loses those memories. By the time Jonathan escaped Dracula's castle, he could not even recognize his own wife. Dracula must have some kind of connection with those he turns into vampires, because he was able to communicate with Lucy through a mirror, and she was able to sense where he was. After Jonathan escaped Dracula's castle, he wrote a journal of what happened there, or so he thought. He was confused why Agatha wanted to hear the story from him, rather than just reading his journal, but she shows him what he wrote down. "I will serve Dracula, Dracula, Dracula." He filled the entire journal with ramblings and praises of Dracula. He is shocked, having no idea he wrote this. He swore he wrote the account of his stay at the castle, but Dracula must have played a trick on his mind somehow, or would not allow John to tell the secrets of the castle. Animal and human blood seems to be fine for vampires to consume because we see bite marks on a bird when they are at sea, but the blood of someone with cancer is poisonous to Dracula and will kill him. When Dracula sees blood, he has a hard time controlling himself and usually goes into a temporary feral state where his eyes turn red and he attacks. Dracula does not have any bodily functions, as he jokes about not needing a toilet.
"It's a toilet, I'm a vampire. Why have you given me a toilet?"
He also only consumes blood. We never see him eat any regular food or drink. Dracula is said to have the strength of 20 men and super speed. He can climb sheer walls, fly, and we see him shapeshift into a wolf and possess another human. After possessing the wolf and the human, he crawls out from inside them. Dracula can possess another human's body, but his eye color will always remain his own. We see Johnny has bright blue eyes, but when Dracula was inside him, they're not blue anymore. Even Johnny's wife notices and asks him what's wrong with his eyes, to which he replies, "They're not my eyes." He can also control bats and wolves and make them attack people. Not only is he super strong, but he's basically invincible. Bullets and knives are seen going through him, causing what seems like no harm, as Dracula doesn't even react. Even his skin seems to be stronger than normal. When Agatha attempted to take his blood, she couldn't penetrate his skin with the needle. He also has the ability to create mist. This mist can block out the sunlight, allowing him to walk outside if he needs to.
What sort of fog follows a ship?
He must sleep during the day, and he does so in a coffin with his native soil. This is why when he travels in the boat, they find 50 boxes filled with dirt. Sleeping in his coffin allows him to heal from wounds and regenerate. When the ship sunk with him on it, he was able to climb into one of the coffins and stay in a kind of hibernation for 123 years until he was awakened. So he can also use his coffin to go into a kind of hibernation. Dracula has the ability to use mirrors. He says mirrors are a much deeper and darker magic than most people understand. He was able to let Dorabella see what her future would have been like with her husband before Dracula kills her. He was also able to come to Lucy in a mirror after she died and talk to her. This part is very interesting. When Dracula looks in a mirror, he sees his true self, old and withered like a corpse. However, when Lucy is turned into a vampire and looks in the mirror, she sees herself as beautiful, when in fact she looks like a corpse, so it's like the complete opposite effect. Mirrors could potentially work different for all vampires depending on their mindset. Now let's take a look at Dracula's weaknesses and their origin. As I said before, the undead only have one weakness, a stake through the heart. But Dracula has a few weaknesses: cancerous blood, sunlight, crosses, certain holy objects, and needing an invitation. When the cross is used against Dracula, it makes him recoil and look away. It also seems to weaken him, making him unable to attack the person holding it. However, the wolves and bats he controls are not affected by the cross, and that's how he manages to get away even after being surrounded by crosses. Light is shown hurting him, and a cross, or Bible pages nailed to the floor, can stop him like a barrier. All of these weaknesses have the same origin, and they have something else in common. They aren't real. Remember how Dracula can pick up new languages and memories by feeding on someone? Well, it turns out he can also pick up superstitions. He fed on many people that believed the legends of Count Dracula, and so eventually, over time, he came to believe them too. The cross, however, is a little different. Dracula's father died in battle, his grandfather, his sons, and their sons. Dracula dreamed of a warrior's grave, but fears death, which is why he is afraid of the cross. He thought he feared the cross because he fed on Christians and religious people that feared the cross, but it was actually because of faith, and the cross represents the courage it takes to die. Agatha, while in Zoe's body, proved this to Dracula by pulling the curtain away and nothing happens. For the first time in over 500 years, Dracula stands in the light. I want to briefly talk about the Van Helsings. Their bloodline might have special properties because Agatha was bitten by Dracula multiple times but never came back as the undead or a vampire. And the same with Zoe, although she did have cancer, so that might change things. After speaking with Dracula, Zoe drank a phial of Dracula's blood, and since Dracula had fed on Agatha, they were able to connect to each other. Agatha said this is because their DNA was compatible, so possibly other relatives could do this as well. Like Dracula said, blood is lives. Well, that's my video on the Dracula 2020 miniseries. I would give this series a 9 out of 10. It's not only a great vampire show, but just a great show, period. I kinda think of it more as like 3 movies rather than a show. I tried not to spoil too much from the story and explore the things that aren't talked about too much in the show. If you haven't seen this series, it's a must watch, and it should be available for everyone on Netflix because it's a Netflix original. If not, it's also on BBC. All the episodes have great characters, drama, and horror, which I love. If there's any other movies or TV shows you'd like me to cover, please leave them in the comments. If you enjoyed, leave a like, and if you haven't, maybe subscribe. I really appreciate it. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.